Here is something nobody wants to say out loud. The most powerful men in history, conquerors, kings, generals, men who made entire nations tremble, were consistently, repeatedly, and embarrassingly controlled by one thing. Not their enemies, not their rivals, not politics or fate or bad luck. Themselves. And the people who understood this best were not philosophers, not advisors, not other rulers. It was the women they paid to spend time with them. Machiavelli watched this happen. He studied it, and what he wrote about it afterwards changed how the world thinks about power forever. Welcome back to Epic Stories, where history tells you the truth that school never did. Before we get into today's story, I have to stop for a second. We just hit 200 subscribers. 200 of you chose to be here. 200 people decided that real history, raw, unfiltered, and told the way it deserves to be told, was worth their time. If you're one of those 200, I genuinely mean this. Thank you. You found this channel early, and that means everything to me. And if you're brand new here, welcome. You picked the right video to start with. Stay till the end. You will not regret it. Let's get into it. Florence, late 1400s. The city is a powder keg. Political families are stabbing each other in the back, sometimes literally. The church is corrupt from the top down. Mercenary armies are switching sides based on who pays more. And everywhere you look, men who are supposed to be in control are making decisions so stupid they defy explanation. Niccolò Machiavelli is watching all of it. He is young, sharp, and deeply unsatisfied with the explanations people give for why powerful men fail. The official reasons are always clean. Bad timing, betrayal, God's will. But Machiavelli does not believe in clean explanations. He believes in honest ones. So he starts looking in places most educated men refuse to go. And what he finds there breaks something open in his thinking that never fully closes again. The brothels of Florence were not hidden. They were known, taxed, and in some cases officially regulated by the city. The women who worked there operated at the bottom of Florentine society in terms of status, but they sat at the absolute center of some of the most important information flows in the entire city. Because every man came to them eventually. Merchants who controlled trade routes. Priests who preached abstinence from pulpits every Sunday. Military commanders who had just returned from campaigns. Politicians who had spent all day performing dignity and restraint in council chambers. They all showed up, and when they did, every performance stopped. What Machiavelli understood, and this is the part that made him genuinely dangerous as a thinker, was that these women were not just witnesses. They were analysts. They had to be. Their survival depended entirely on their ability to read men accurately and quickly, to understand what a man actually needed, to know when his ego was running the situation, to recognize when fear was dressed up as confidence, to see the difference between what a man said and what he actually wanted. These women were doing, in real time, exactly what Machiavelli would later describe in The Prince. They were reading power, and they were doing it better than almost anyone else in Florence. Here is what they saw night after night. A man could negotiate a trade deal worth a fortune with complete composure. He could command soldiers, manage estates, sit across from enemies, and show nothing. But the moment something touched his ego directly, the moment someone made him feel small or unwanted or replaceable, that same man fell apart. Completely. Every ounce of discipline he had built evaporated. Machiavelli documented this pattern obsessively. He watched men throw away political alliances over wounded pride. He watched commanders abandon strategically superior positions because retreating felt humiliating. He watched men who had spent decades building wealth and influence hand enormous leverage to people who had simply figured out what they needed to hear. And the need, this is the part Machiavelli found most disturbing. The need was almost always the same. These men did not just want physical release. They wanted to feel like the most important person in the room. They wanted someone to look at them without judgment, without agenda, without the constant political calculation that defined every other relationship in their lives. They wanted to feel powerful in a space where their actual power meant nothing. That desperation made them catastrophically easy to manipulate. Machiavelli wrote about a Florentine official. He kept the name vague, but the story was clearly real, who had built a reputation as one of the most disciplined negotiators in the city. Cold, unreadable, never gave an inch. But this man had developed a fixation on a specific woman. He became obsessed. He started making financial decisions based on keeping her attention. He began sharing things he should never have shared. Within 2 years, information that should have been locked inside his own head was circulating among his rivals. He never recovered politically, and Machiavelli's response to this story was not sympathy. It was not judgment either. It was something colder, almost clinical. He wrote that the man's enemies had not defeated him. He had handed them the weapon and shown them exactly where to aim it. This is the core of everything Machiavelli ever wrote about weakness. It is not that desire itself is the problem. It is that most men never honestly examine their own desires. They perform control in public while their actual vulnerabilities sit completely exposed, visible to anyone paying attention. The women of Florence were paying attention. Some of them used what they knew passively, simply surviving, doing their jobs, staying out of politics as much as they could. But others understood the value of what passed through those rooms. Information, confessions, fears spoken out loud in moments of weakness that men would never admit to in daylight. In a city where information was currency, these women were sitting on fortunes. Machiavelli himself was not immune to any of this. That is the part his legacy tends to quietly erase. He was famously obsessed with a woman named Lauricia, a courtesan he wrote about in letters that his biographers have struggled to contextualize politely ever since. The letters are embarrassing in the most human way. The cold political genius, who wrote about never letting emotion drive decisions, was writing to friends about a woman the way a teenager writes in a diary. Desperate, irrational, completely aware that he was being irrational and unable to stop. He knew exactly what was happening to him. He had written the analysis. He understood the mechanism, and it still took him completely apart. That detail matters more than almost anything else in his biography, because it tells you that Machiavelli was not writing the prince from a position of having mastered himself. He was writing it as a man who understood human weakness intimately, including his own, and was trying to map it as honestly as he could so that someone, somewhere, might actually use the knowledge. If this is hitting differently than you expected, good, hit the like button. Subscribe if you're not already here. And drop a comment below. Do you think self-awareness actually protects you from this? Or does knowing your weakness change nothing? I want to see what you think. The final piece of this story is the one that ties everything together. When Machiavelli was eventually arrested, tortured, and exiled by the returning Medici government, he lost everything. 14 years of political service. His reputation, his income, his place in the city he had spent his entire adult life studying. He was sent to a farm outside Florence and told to stay there. And in that silence, stripped of every distraction, he sat down and wrote the book that would outlast every single person who had ever humiliated him. The Prince is not a celebration of ruthlessness. Read it carefully, and it is actually a warning, a long, detailed, almost frustrated warning about what happens when men in power refuse to see themselves clearly. Every ruler Machiavelli dissects in that book falls for the same reason. Not because their enemies were stronger, but because they had weaknesses they would not examine, and those weaknesses were found and used. The men who succeeded in Machiavelli's analysis were not the most powerful. They were the most honest with themselves. They knew what they wanted. They knew what they feared. They knew where they could be reached, and they guarded those places instead of pretending those places did not exist. That knowledge, Machiavelli argued, was the only real protection any person in power ever had. The women of Florence understood this before he put it into words. They lived it every single day. 500 years later, the pattern has not changed at all. You can watch it happen in real time. Careers built over decades collapsing in weeks. Men who survived boardrooms and battlefields getting completely undone by something embarrassingly personal. The mechanisms Machiavelli described in the backstreets of Renaissance Florence are running in exactly the same way today. In offices, in politics, in every room where power and desire end up in the same space. The uncomfortable truth is this: your greatest enemy is not out there somewhere waiting to attack you. It is the part of yourself you refuse to look at directly. The need you pretend is not there. The weakness you have convinced yourself does not apply to you because you are smarter or more disciplined or more self-aware than the men who came before you. Every man who ever got destroyed by this thought the same thing. Machiavelli knew it. The women who taught him knew it even better. Know yourself before someone else does. That is the whole lesson. That is what the prince was really about. And that is what 400 women in Florentine brothels understood long before any philosopher put it into words. If this made you think even uncomfortably, that is the point. Like the video, subscribe to Epoch Stories, and leave a comment below because I genuinely want to know. Do you think most men ever truly know their own weaknesses? Or do we just get better at hiding them from ourselves? This is Epoch Stories. History is never what you think it is.